Yeah, I changed the title because we don't have an EPA app, but there will be a little bit of an announcement there. So just don't want to bury the lead there, but here we go. I don't have any disclosures except the one I just made about the EPA app. But okay, so essentially we'll just start with the why. Just very briefly, the idea here, and this has been developed beginning almost 10 years now, in starting with what you want, what does the Fellowship Council think, and the sponsoring societies think a graduating fellow from each of the different programs should be able to do independently in practice safely. And this is a very intuitive framework, the way it's been set up with what are called these little micro assessments. It's basically workplace evaluations. We don't have to overthink it. I think there's been a lot of like rhetoric and just don't overthink it. These are just little micro, take a minute, workplace assessments. What actually happened in that interaction you just had with the fellow, whether that's clinic, the OR, or postoperative care. What did you actually trust the fellow to do? Did you get out of bed at 3 in the morning to see that patient in the emergency room? If you didn't, then you trusted to manage that patient either with level 3 or level 4 because that's what actually happened. So it's very, very simple and intuitive, and I think we just have to just make it pretty simple. How does this fit in? So this, there's a lot of workplace assessments that are collected ideally in different environments. These are collected in an e-portfolio, so that's through the website, and and then they're aggregated in some way, and then there's some kind of committee, depending on the size of the program, that's going to look at all the assessments. The EPAs, but also the quarterly assessment, that's more of a global assessment, the scholarly activity and so forth, and make an overall gestalt impression or holistic impression about that fellow's path towards that end goal. So and that's all it is. There's nothing scary about it. So how can we what are some of how can we get these done and make them useful to the fellow to know exactly where they stand and what they need to be working on at that stage of their training. So micro assessments after basically every clinical encounter would be a great ideal. As I mentioned, they take really, really very, very almost no time. Ideally, they're how it works and what we've seen in the data is it really has to be initiated by the fellow. And that's just a habit to get into. So basically the fellow completes their self-assessment. Again, it takes a minute it probably takes the fellow about 3 minutes because they have to put in some of the case information. Then the faculty that did supervise them for that case will receive usually a text or an email, depending how it's set up, and that there's an assessment to complete, and they just click on and go ahead and do the exact same thing for that case. It can be initiated by the faculty, but doesn't seem that I don't think it works as well that way. Just we're way worse at this than the fellows. Now the fellow and the faculty have to complete it for it to be considered complete, because we want the fellow to get your feedback, but also have that ability to self-assess and then see what the supervising faculty, what level that they put that clinical encounter at as well. And that will expire at 72 hours because then it's hard to remember that patient in clinic that day. How many do we have to do is an FAQ. So basically, the more information you're giving, probably the better. The more information to that fellow about how they're doing, probably the better. So this year, as was mentioned briefly, by Anne, is that each program, in terms of assessments and the rules, each program has to submit at least one technical skills assessment per index case per quarter. So now most of those are by goals. So there's also an intraoperative assessment tool, but new for this year is that can be replaced. So that just we don't want to keep adding. So that was clearly something that came up in comments and discussions that we had through the pilot. And as there was a soft rollout in 22-23. So this can be replaced so that you don't have to do that anymore, that index case assessment, by if you do a minimum of 5 EPAs, any EPAs in any phase per quarter, to just encourage uptake of this approach. I think Anne went through this. I don't want to show. This is just a video of well, I can't really show it, but of how. Yeah, okay, I am showing it. Great. Of how this works. Just briefly, it kind of. This is what I think. Hopefully, who's done this in the room? Who's filled out an EPA? one of these. So the vast majority of you have done this, so I don't want to dwell on this. This is all on the Fellowship Council website as well, if you need a refresher. But basically, that's what it will look like for the fellow or for the program director as they want to look at a completed EPA. So how is this going? So basically, we see increased uptake over time. So this started with the pilot, and so there were 15 programs in the pilot. And then there's kind of a soft rollout over the last couple of years with more of education, all of the materials on the website under EPA. So there's been webinars, there's an instruction manual, there's hopefully there's FAQs. So hopefully that's permeated. Last year, without that EPA sort of 5-to-1 replacement, we saw 133 programs at least completing at least one EPA, and the green is the ones that are initiated but weren't completed, and then the blue are completed. So about 67% of the ones that are initiated by the fellow are completed by the faculty. That's also a number that, so when there's something initiated by the fellow, they fill it all out and then it's not completed, I would say that's something we want to improve on, but that number has stayed pretty steady. So where are we this year? Year to date, hot off the presses, April 14th. So we have 213 active programs. We have about 60% of the programs that at least have dabbled, at least have tried it at least once. But then we have 89 programs that haven't even filled out or even initiated any EPAs. And for those that have initiated EPAs, the vast majority have completed it. So it's not that it's so difficult. And a few are sort of more on the super user side of things and you can see that for that 5 EPA, sale on EPAs. So the uptake's not too bad. So about 60 programs have met that requirement. So of the active programs using at least EPAs, about 50% of them have met that limit, so that they can avoid filling out that goals or something else. I think this gives a lot more information. Then we have our super users. So you can see there are some programs that are very engaged in this, so they get the blue ribbon. And interestingly, some of these are the same as last year, but some of them are not the same as last year. So I think a lot of it is driven by the interest of the fellow and the program. Strategies. So number one, very simple. Make sure your faculty are signed up. That's been like surprisingly is just a little issue. So a lot of times if the fellow initiates it and the faculty, for whatever reason, another site, another rotation, so just the first thing is program directors and the program have to make sure that the faculty are signed up. I think it's useful to assign specific EPAs to specific faculty. It's not that, just take a look at what the mandatory EPAs of your program designation, and you can see who's doing and try, to say to your faculty, let's try to, you're doing a lot of hernias, in advanced GI-MIS, so please just focus on those ones and try to get a few of them filled out. I think I think it's useful to hopefully to show them what I just have shown is very intuitive and very easy. Don't worry about the terminology. It's just a little quick assessment that you could do for your fellows. Of course, engaging the fellows is key. Why is this useful? You're going to get a lot more feedback in a lot more in-the-moment situation. So I think it is useful. I personally don't think like that a goals evaluation of a case that you don't even remember which one it was. It's 5-4, 5-4, 5. It's not necessarily going to give a lot of information. And this is a habit, right? So the more you get into it, like every time you go to the gym and you log your workout, or so you kind of get in the habit of doing that, and then it gets a little easier. So for the competence committee, that's, as I mentioned, where you're going to be aggregating this information. You can find this form on the website, and it's just an easy way to give the fellow a little bit of written information about whether you think there's an area of focus. As I mentioned, there's a bunch of the sort of mandatory EPAs. That gets back to the idea of defining what the finishing fellow is supposed to be able to do in practice. So how do you aggregate this on the website? Right now, the analytics are pretty clunky. This just can give you a sense of, how many have been done, for example, of the mandatory ones for your program. But then there's not really a way to aggregate them on the website. You can see all of the data there, but if you're the program director or the fellow, you have to kind of click through each one separately. So the app is coming. This has been in discussion for years, but I did hear that it's been approved by the exec. So that's going to be the app that was developed at the University of Wisconsin. So, basically, I think the main advantage is going to be how the data is aggregated and presented back to the fellow. So you can see that, not to go over this in too much detail, but it's going to give the fellow and the program a lot nicer way to see where the fellows are over time. And also to see what faculty are filling out the assessments. So thank you.